Welcome everyone to today's webinar on understanding, preventing, and disputing Walmart allowance deductions. We're excited to go through some new features in Deductions Navigator for Walmart today in our SupplyPike Academy webinar. Before we get started, just a real quick introduction to your hosts. My name is Krista Nicewarner. I am the VP of Customer Success here at SupplyPike, so I lead our customer success and support teams. And then with me today, I have Weston, who is our product manager, and I'll let Weston introduce himself.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Krista. So I'm Weston Parks. I'm the product manager of Deductions Navigator Walmart. So if y'all have ever chatted in with questions before, good chance that me and Krista and the CS team are trying to field some of those questions. So I've been at SupplyPike for over a year now, and yeah, help manage the app and try and come out with features to make it a little more useful and features that help our customers dispute their deductions.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Weston. So today we're going to talk about Walmart allowance deductions. We're going to go through some new features that we've recently added to Deductions Navigator for Walmart. And a little bit later in the webinar today, we'll dive into a live demo or a training session to show you how to set up your allowance deductions disputing within Deductions Navigator for Walmart. So really excited to show you these features today and to help you get started. Before we dive into that, just a few housekeeping items. We are recording today's webinar, so if you would like a copy of that, along with a copy of the slide deck from today's presentation, we will email that to you. It generally takes us about 3 to 4 business days to get the recording together for you. So you should see an email towards the end of the week or early next week with a copy of the slide deck and the recording. Also, we are happy to take any questions that you have today during the webinar. We'll have a couple of different times where we can pause to kind of review questions. So you'll notice at the bottom of your Zoom webinar, you should see a box or a dialog that says Q&A. If you'd like to, go ahead and open that up. And as a question pops into your mind throughout the webinar, just go ahead and type your question in. We will either answer it live or we'll respond to you there, and just make sure we get all of your questions answered. We'll also have some time at the end of the webinar today that we'll dedicate specifically to answer any final questions that you have. But just a reminder, use that Q&A box so that you can post all of your questions there. All right, let's dive in and just kind of take a look at the basics of Walmart allowance deductions as well as your supplier agreement. So in this presentation today, we're going to be covering your supplier agreement and how to use that to determine validity of your allowance deductions that you see within Deductions Navigator, and also how to fight any invalid allowance deductions that you see in SupplyPike. We will show you how to upload your supplier agreement to Deductions Navigator for Walmart. And then we'll also walk you through the steps on setting up and using our auto disputing feature for a multitude of codes, including your allowance deductions that are invalid. So let's start with the supplier agreement. First we'll need to understand what your supplier agreement is and how it factors into disputing invalid allowance deductions. So your supplier agreement is a legal document that's detailing your agreement to adhere to Walmart's supplier standards. So the supplier agreement applies to anyone that's supplying product to Walmart for resale and any agents used by suppliers. Your supplier agreement includes general information, terms of shipping, terms of payment, returned merchandise, a multitude of other things, along with your agreed upon discounts or allowances, which is what comes into effect here. So the supplier agreement helps SupplyPike understand if the allowance deductions that you see within Deductions Navigator are valid allowance deductions or if they are invalid allowance deductions according to your agreed upon allowances inside of the supplier agreement. So in addition, once you upload your supplier agreement to SupplyPike, we will attach that supplier agreement to the corresponding deductions that you see in Deductions Navigator for Walmart, so that you can use the supplier agreement document when you are fighting those invalid deductions. So again, adding that supplier agreement information into SupplyPike will not only attach the agreement to the corresponding deductions, but it's also going to activate the validity judgment and the ability for the system to determine if the allowance deductions you're seeing are valid or invalid, as well as give you that ability to dispute any invalid allowance deductions that are being taken excessively. So before you can add your supplier agreement to Deductions Navigator and start seeing those validity judgments inside of SupplyPike, you're going to need to go into RetailLink to download your supplier agreement. So let's take a look at the steps that you'll need to follow inside of RetailLink to locate and download that supplier agreement. So, first off, you're going to log into your RetailLink account. In the top right-hand corner of your RetailLink account, you'll see a user profile section. So on the slide here, you'll see that in the very right-hand corner, it looks like a person icon. You're going to click there. And then from there, you're going to click on My Agreements, which is right above the log out button. Once you get into that My Agreements section, you're going to see a button that says Sign an Agreement. So I know that seems scary to click on something that says Sign an Agreement, but you're actually not signing anything when you click that. Once you click the button, you'll see the option to view or download the supplier agreement document for each business unit that you need to add into SupplyPike. So to add a small complication to that, some suppliers will see a dialog after clicking on My Agreements that says switch to the latest version. So if you see a dialog when you click there that says switch to the latest version, just go ahead and click on that. And then after changing over to the latest version, you should see the option to sign an agreement as well. So once you click on Sign an Agreement, again, you're going to see the list of supplier agreements there, along with the option to view them or download them. So you will want to go ahead and download that supplier agreement document to your computer and make sure you download all of the relevant supplier agreement documents for each business unit that you need to add into SupplyPike. And from there, you're going to return to Deductions Navigator to actually upload the document, which we're going to show you the steps on how to do that here in just a bit in our demo portion. So again, user profile, My Agreements, Sign Agreement, and then you'll be able to download the document from there. So once you've got that supplier agreement, let's take a look at the deduction codes inside of SupplyPike that this supplier agreement will actually help you with. So we know that shortage codes are really the bread and butter of what you have been disputing in SupplyPike, and that's not going to change with this new feature. However, we wanted to add the ability for you to dispute those invalid allowance deductions so that you can really be fully comprehensive in making sure that you fight all of the invalid deductions that are hitting your bottom line. So the point of this feature is to help you identify the invalid allowances and then dispute the ones that are incorrect or excessive. You may have fewer invalid allowance deductions because Walmart does automate that system based upon your supplier agreement. So there's a lot less human error involved in allowances. We see a lot of human error with shortage deductions, which can cause those to increase. But since the allowance deductions are automated, there is less than that. But there are invalid allowance deductions that make it through. So when they are invalid, we want to make sure that you have the ability to dispute them. So you'll see all of the list of applicable codes on the slide here in front of you that your supplier agreement can help you dispute. We do have a very extensive help center that you can visit to get detail on each of these codes. And also best practices for preventing them and disputing them. So if you're not familiar with our help center, you can visit it at help.supplypike.com. We also have a lot of this content on our Supplier Wiki site as well. So check those out, dig into each of the codes. And of course, we're happy to help you, if you have any questions, but that's a really good resource for you. So along with, individual disputing of the invalid allowance codes, we have also added the ability for you to use our auto disputing feature for the codes that you see listed here on your screen. So we're going to take a look shortly at how you can set up our auto disputing feature in SupplyPike, and then also how you can include your invalid allowance deductions in your auto disputing settings. So again, adding the supplier agreement helps you determine if they are invalid, and then using our auto dispute feature will automatically submit those invalid allowance deductions for you, along with the pricing and shortage deductions that you're used to. All right, so on that note, let's take a deeper dive into this new allowance disputing feature in SupplyPike. We're going to do a live demo. I'm going to pause the screen share for just a moment and transfer it over to Weston, and he's going to lead our demonstration training today. All right, Weston.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Krista. So let me share my screen here. All right, are you guys seeing the Deductions Navigator dashboard?
Yes, that's perfect. Thanks, Weston.
Okay, cool. So just to outline what we're going to do in this demo, we're just going to quickly go through how to add a supplier agreements, how that affects the validity on those allowance deductions, and then we can talk through the auto dispute feature. So to start, like Krista said, here's the supplier settings page, and we are specifically focusing on supplier agreements. And so step one of this process is going ahead and downloading that supplier agreement from RetailLink. Once you have that downloaded, you're now uploading that into Deductions Navigator. And so that's where this starts. You're going to go ahead and click Add an Agreement, choose your file that you just downloaded from RetailLink. The nature of these supplier agreements is pretty personal. So we did a pretty basic screenshot here of what you might see on your supplier agreement. Now, realistically, these will probably be anywhere from 10 to 20 pages. But the only page you're worried about when uploading these supplier agreements, as far as allowances go, is this page here that states your allowances for that supplier agreement. So here in a sec, we're going to be typing this into Deductions Navigator, but we will go ahead and upload this entire supplier agreements. All right, so that has been uploaded. So the only other step here is filling in some of these details of what those allowances are. So starting here, the first three here that it's asking is the department number. So department number, that just refers to your merchandising departments. It's anywhere from 1 to 99. And here you'll state which department number this is for. And then sequence number is random numbers 0 through 9 that Walmart also assigns. And taking a step back, the way you find this in your supplier agreement is it will always be listed on that first page of your supplier agreement. This also is always going to be your 9-digit vendor number. So you'll see your 6-digit vendor number here, followed by your 2-digit department number, followed by your 1-digit sequence number. I know that's a lot, but on that first page, it should clearly states what your 9-digit number is, and that's what you're inputting here. All right. Effective dates. So this will also always be stated on that first page of the supplier agreement. Don't be alarmed if your effective date seems really, really old. A lot of times we see it being years old, 2016, 2020, whatever it may be. They don't update them super frequently from everything we've seen. The one caveat here is Walmart does not list a expiration date, only the effective date. So that means every few years, if they ever do expire, you will need to come in here and update that, but that should be once every few years, essentially, from everything we've seen so far. Okay, so on this, let's say that it was effective in 2019. Due to the nature of these, we said they likely last a few years. So there's that. This is essentially how we match to specific deductions, because when a deduction comes in, it will state this 9-digit vendor number. And that's kind of what we're using as our map to show which supplier agreement goes with which deduction. So more on that later, but just keep that in mind. All right, so last part of this is we need to actually state these allowances here. So looking at the supplier agreement, the first one stated here is that new store allowance at 10%. So payment frequency, you have off invoice or credit memo. Usually it's off invoice, and that will always be stated as well. The payment method, the payment frequency. It's kind of annoying. Sometimes Walmart abbreviates this to OI and EI, but it should always state down below exactly what that means. So we are putting that in off invoice, each invoice. What that means is there should be a 10% allowance off every invoice for each invoice for this new store allowance in this example. Also keep in mind, these are super personalized. It's not one standard allowance deduction percent for all Walmart vendors. Of course, you guys are deciding this with your Walmart buyer every few years. So continuing down the list, you'll see new warehouse allowance here. So we're going to this drop-down menu, clicking that new warehouse allowance. That's also 10% in this example, and that's what we're stating here. All right, we have two more. We have WA and QD, which is the warehouse distribution allowance. So we're going to go ahead and add that. And this, you could see, was only 1%. So that's what I'm adding here. Last one would be that QD, quantity discount, at 1%. So that is it for this supplier agreement. I want to pause here and say, most Walmart vendors have several supplier agreements in RetailLink that you can download and upload into Deductions Navigator. So that's important to note. I know it's not going to be a one that catches all. It's going to be likely a few, and they're all different 9-digit vendor numbers. So it's important that you upload as many as you can find, because that'll help us attach these supplier agreements to as many deductions as possible, so that we can automate the process for you and make that a little bit easier when you go to dispute these. The last thing I wanted to mention here is just this note. be sure when you're uploading these allowances in Deductions Navigator to list out any and all that are stated on the supplier agreements, because that is important for our validity, which we will talk about next. All right. So a little granular here, but now we're going to zoom out a little bit and talk about what this actually does for us in the app. So this is now, you can view this, you can edit it, you can delete it at any time in the app under this settings page. And the whole reason we did this, like we said, there might be a few supplier agreements that would all be listed here. The reason we're doing this is so that we can attach these to relevant deductions. So our SupplyPike users, you'll know that with these deductions, say this shortage code 22, a big time savings piece of our app is we are able to attach all relevant proof documents. So your purchase order, your invoice, your BOL, your claim, your inventory received report, if that helps you fight your case. That is what we're trying to do for these allowances. So allowances, this code 54, for example, that's a warehouse allowance. You'll remember we just added that warehouse allowance at 1% on that supplier agreement. So we should see that supplier agreement attached to this specific code 54, if it's for that specific department and sequence number, which in this case it is, which is why this has been generated right here. If we open this up, you will see that shortens Walmart supplier agreements. So keep in mind, this will be a lot longer when you do real live supplier agreements. It's going to be 10 or 15 pages, I believe. But at the end of the day, this is the page that they will be looking at to determine if a deduction is valid or not. All right, so that's that first value add, is that we're able to automatically upload supplier agreements to all relevant deductions. This code 54 was just one example. So the second value add of adding those supplier agreements is this validity analysis right here. So you can say in this example, hey, you got this code 54 deduction for $10.80. This is an invalid deduction because you did give a 1% allowance, just like that supplier agreement stated. So to Krista's point earlier, you will see a lot of likely valid deductions due to the nature of allowances. A lot of them are automated on Walmart's ends and have a lower, they basically have a much lower dispute rate than shortages because there's not that human element involved as much. But important to note that we do see invalid allowances, and we are trying to set you up for success and make sure you're disputing those invalid allowances. And then pausing here, I want to state the reason sometimes, we're saying these are automated, so why would these ever be invalid? Well, a lot of times these are invalid because due to the nature of how you're stating those allowances given can trip the automation on Walmart's side. So we can talk about more about this if we need to later, but I wanted to mention that there's basically two places to state allowances. You can either give an allowance on each individual line item in that invoice, or you can do a summarized allowance given at the bottom of your invoice that you send to Walmart. So if Walmart is expecting you to be giving it on each line item and you're only giving the allowance at the very bottom of the invoice, Walmart thinks you didn't give an allowance and they're going to hit you with a deduction. And you can win those. Typically, you can say, hey, allowance was given, see my invoice here and my supplier agreement listed as well. So important to note, if you're getting hit with a lot of these, check out your invoices and how you're generating those to make sure Walmart is expecting it at the correct spot. In this example, either on each individual line item or the summarized allowance given at the bottom. All right. So once you find a deduction, that we have attached the supplier agreement to that we just added, and you see that it is invalid, you can go ahead and submit that dispute. This is where the automation comes into play. You can either individually take a look at all of these and dispute one by one. You can also bulk submit. You can use a lot of these filters to only look at invalid ones or likely invalid ones. Check out why you're seeing likely valid ones in the first place. You can kind of do some root cause analysis here. But I wanted to showcase that you can dispute them one by one or bulk dispute any of these deductions. And then moving to the last topic for this live example, the third option you can do to dispute these would be auto disputing. So I went up to supplier settings again. This is where we set up the supplier agreements in the first place. But this first tab here is auto disputing. So auto disputing is something we rolled out early in 2022 and something we've been chipping away, getting more and more deduction codes able to be auto disputed. What that means is if you don't want to worry about these deductions every single day and you want to go ahead and dispute those low-hanging fruit that are most likely invalid, that you have a high chance of getting paid back on, we can actually auto dispute those for you. So you'll kind of see them bucketed into three groups here. What we started with when we released this was those shortage deductions. These are what everyone is probably familiar with, these code 22s, 23s, 24s, 25s. You know, no matter how buttoned up you are at shipping, due to the human nature of Walmart receiving your merchandise, you can always expect to get these shortage deductions. And so we're trying to offload that, make it a little easier to dispute those. And we want to give our customers as many buttons as possible so that they can steer the ship here, so that they can only auto dispute the deductions they want to auto dispute, because we have a vast array of different customers. Some like to individually go and investigate if they should dispute something. And some people, you know, larger clients, they just receive such a high amount that they love the automation feature of auto disputing. So all that to be said, we try and solve it for all types of customers here by saying, okay, do you want to dispute invalid ones, likely invalids, any and all that aren't blatantly valid here for shortage deductions? Pricing deductions work the same way. Those are those code 11s. And now bringing it back to allowance codes, which of course is what we're talking about today. This is our most recent release that you can auto dispute all of these allowance deductions here. So auto dispute works essentially the same way. But the validity criteria that we mentioned earlier, you're able to see if a deduction is valid or invalid based off the supplier agreement for these allowances. That is what's dictating whether or not something gets auto disputed. So that should kind of put you at ease, because you know we're not just gonna be lazy about this and auto dispute every and all deduction that comes through. That tends to be a bad process, and we don't want to create more of a backlog for Walmart to sift through than need be. So long story short, these allowance deductions will only get auto disputed if, number one, they have all of the proof documents attached, AKA in this example, that would be that supplier agreement and that purchase order and that invoice, so that you're set up for success when you do dispute these. And then number two, the other thing we make sure we have before we dispute something is we want to make sure these are invalid deductions only that we are disputing. So what that means, of course, is we looked at your supplier agreement. You were supposed to give a 1% allowance on this specific deduction. You did indeed give a 1% allowance on that invoice. So we have determined that this is most likely an invalid deduction, and you have a high chance of winning that money back. So once you can kind of, configure which ones you want to turn on or off, which ones you might want to look at individually, so you don't want to auto dispute, we try and build that into the app here so that you can have as much hands-on or hands-off experience as you want. The last thing I'll talk about quickly is this threshold. We also built this in because some people, they really want to try this feature, but they don't feel comfortable with the automation of, say it's a, $50,000 shortage deduction. They're wanting to keep their eyes on those larger dollar deductions. So you can say, hey, I only want to apply this for deductions under $500, whatever it may be. You can set that threshold here, so you don't have to worry about those giant deductions you might receive getting auto disputed. But if you leave it blank, we can auto dispute any and all deductions, so long as they meet the criteria here. All right, so that covers one, how to upload that supplier agreement, so that we can get that validity analysis on those allowances. And then we also talked about what that looks like on the actual allowance deductions you may receive. That sets you up for success in seeing that supplier agreement added to any and all deductions you might receive, as well as give you a validity analysis here. And then we talked about how to set up auto dispute if you truly want to be hands off in this approach on disputing these, so that if it matches our two criteria here, we will go ahead and do that for you and take the heavy lifting off your plate. So that's all I have for now. I'm going to turn it back over to Krista.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Weston. Let me get my screen share going for us here. We have some time for questions today. So just a reminder, you can use the Q&A box on your screen to add any questions that you have. I do have a couple of other things I'd like to show you while you're thinking of your questions. So if, again, while I'm talking through the next things, please feel free to go ahead and add any questions that you have into the Q&A box. We have a few resources for you available on both our supplier wiki site as well as our help center. So I wanted to go through those resources with you really quick. Our deductions code explain guide is super helpful on going through all of the Walmart deduction codes and helping you to learn what those codes are for, root cause on and why you are receiving those deductions, suggestions on how to prevent them, and then also best practices for disputing them. So if you are interested in downloading that deductions code explain guide, we have posted it in the chat for you today, so you can find the link there. We also have a really extensive deduction code knowledge base within our help center that you can access directly from the SupplyPike application. And this goes into all of the Walmart deduction codes. And again, as I mentioned, just really detailed in helping you to root cause why you are receiving those, suggestions on preventing them and disputing them. So make sure you utilize those resources, to help optimize your deductions processes. Another thing that I'd like to mention is we also have a chat for our customer success and support team built directly into our application, as well as our help center and supplier wiki resources. So on the bottom of those pages, you'll notice this kind of blue button that is our chat icon. And this can be really helpful for you if you're working inside of Deductions Navigator or any of SupplyPike's applications and you need help doing a specific action. So if you're starting the process of uploading your supplier agreement and filling out all of those allowances, and you run into a question or need help doing that, this is a really way to get quick help from our customer success and support team. So just click on that icon in the bottom right-hand corner and you can send us a message right here. Just type your question in there or let us know that you need help with something, and we're happy to set up a call to help walk you through setting up your supplier agreement and your allowances, or we can also help you just directly here with our in-app chat. We're super quick at responding to your questions there, and really love to hear from you. We don't want you to get stuck on any of these features that we have available for you in Deductions Navigator, so please reach out if you need help with those. We also have our help center built right directly into the app here as well. So if you want to find some information on, say, code 54 that Weston was showing us, you can just type in that keyword and you'll notice that the first article that appears tells us about code 54s and gives us a great description on how to prevent them and what they are. So we have all of those codes built into this application right here, as well as some other helpful information on how to, add your supplier agreement. If you type in supplier agreement as a keyword, you'll find step-by-step instructions on how to download that from RetailLink and how to upload it into SupplyPike. So a super helpful resource there for you. Also, you'll find within this window a link to all of our supplier wiki events. So we love doing these webinars for you all, love seeing your questions that come through and showing off the new features that we've recently released. So, please use those webinar resources and provide feedback on what you'd like to see in webinars going forward. All right. It doesn't look like we have any questions today, so we'll be finishing up shortly. Weston and I will hang out for about 5 more minutes to see if any questions pop up. But again, we really appreciate everyone who is attending today. If you do think of any questions later, utilize that chat or you'll see our emails here directly on this slide. One last reminder that I wanted to give you a notification about is we do have an online focus group that is being held Friday, December 16th. So that's this Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Central. If you are interested in attending our online focus group to help us direct the where supplier wikis online content will go in the future, we'd love to have you join for that. You can register for that online focus group by going to Supplier Wiki at this site here. So we'd love to see you there and all of your feedback on the content that we're making available for you. All right, again, Weston and I will hang out for about 5 more minutes and happy to answer any questions that you have about allowance disputing. But otherwise, thank you everyone for joining and have a great afternoon.